Hi there, nice to see you. Today we're looking at this picture, a little seasidey sunset. We're going to work through it background to foreground, stage at a time. So I'll go through it bit by bit and you can stop and start whenever you want to. Don't forget there are full instructions as well which you can download off the site. So you can have a look at those. You don't need to follow all the colours, you can make your own up as well if you want to. Quite quick and easy to do, so let's get going. Right, so we're going to do this little beach scene now, sunset, because I haven't done many skies with you, so I thought I'd do a sky for this one. So we're going to keep the foreground very simple. You just want to draw a horizontal line somewhere, or just a little bit above a third of the way up. Make sure it's horizontal, and what I do is just get another piece of paper, line it up with the edge of your paper, and just draw along the edge of the paper that you're using as a measure there, and that will give you a nice horizontal line, because we all tend to drop the line off at one side or the other. So again, I'll just match that up, draw it across that way there. And then above that, I'm going to put a little distant hill, a cliff, and another headland coming in a bit further. A little slightly tapering line across there for where the sea's going to go, and then we're going to build these wiggly sandbanks up as we go, and perhaps put a couple of people in somewhere about a third of the way over. Right, so I'm using Bockingford 300 gram weight paper, nice watercolour paper. I tend to use something a bit thicker quite often when I'm doing a lot of water, but I've only got that one, the 300 gram with me at the moment, so we'll do that. So first of all, we're going to mix the colours up for the sky that we're going to use. So I'm going to use a bit of blue, so ultramarine blue is fine, or a bit of cobalt blue, or even a mixture of ultramarine blue and cerulean blue mix, which gives you a nice summery look to it, although I think it's based on a picture when it was freezing cold in the winter, but still. Then we're going to put a bit of yellow in around here for the sunset, a bit of yellow and red mix, so cadmium yellow and any red really, it makes a nice orangey colour. So a bit warmer with the orangey colour. So I'm mixing all these puddles up first. And then you want a purpley colour, quite strong purpley colour, well, very strong purpley colour into that. So you gradually get these colours stronger and stronger. You could put different colours in, you could put a bit more alizarin crimson in if you wanted to, make it a different colour scheme. But we'll just go for it with those. So I'm going to paint to start off with something like a 12 round nylon-y type brush, but I'm going to wet it first with a mop brush. This is a very soft brush to just wet the paper with. I've got all sorts of different mop brushes, from a squirrel mop to, I have no idea what that is, might be a nice bit of badger, as somebody said to me once, but it's a very soft brush. So you want a little makeup brush or a little shaving brush or something like that, which is nice and soft to put the water on with. I might also use a slightly smaller brush, an 8 round, to tickle in some of the clouds in a minute. So what we're going to do is wet the paper all over. So using clean water and your mop brush, you're going to wet this paper all over. Go backwards and forwards with it. And your paper, I always find it's better to have it stuck to a board, your board's slightly tilted, something behind it there, because then you can move your paper around. As long as you're using a reasonable weight paper, it won't cockle too much. I never pre-stretch paper because I'm too impatient. I just want to get painting straight away. So it does lift a little bit, but it'll always dry flat again, so it should be all right. But it's stuck to a board, so I can just tilt my board and see where it's wet, where it's dry, and if there's any puddles in it. It stops it sitting in puddles if it's tilted slightly. So I'm just going to take the puddles out and just make sure it's got an even coating. So take your time with putting the water on. Panic as soon as you start lifting that paintbrush off to put paint onto it, because you need to really work quite quickly now then. So I'm going to go straight for it now. In with my blue, up in the top corner here, we'll have a little bit of blue colour for a patch of blue sky at the top. We're just bringing that up. Leave a little like wobbly edge. This will be the top of white clouds. So if you just wiggle your brush around, that gives you the top of white clouds in there, and it goes a little bit fuzzy on those edges, which is great. So while I'm doing that, whatever colour I've got on my brush at the time, I will put it on the opposite edge. So while I'm doing that, on the opposite edge down here, I've put that bit of that blue colour. This is all wet down here as well. So forget there's anything there at the moment. We're just making a mirror image of what we're putting at the top there. Clean the brush. It's quite important to clean the brush at that stage, because then we're going to go into the yellowy colours. So in the yellowy colours, I'm going to put those around the middle of the sky here, just to give you that glow where the sunset's going to be. And again, match it with the other side here. So bring it around the other side. So the horizon line is almost like the fold in the sky there. So it's doing a mirror image to it across here, and perhaps a bit over this side as well, and a bit over there. So it's above these. Making sure this stays wet. If it starts to dry out, stop, dry it with a hairdryer, and then re-wet it again. Don't just carry on if it's drying out, because it will just go very streaky and very patchy. I'm then going to go into an orangey colour, so you've got to work somewhere around this speed really to keep you going onto this. So a bit of an orangey colour into it. Again, matching that colour on the opposite side here, a bit of an orangey colour over this side as well. So bringing those colours round, so it comes off the paper at the ends here, and then into, give it a nice sort of reddish glow somewhere, a bit more of an orangey red somewhere around here, where the sun's probably going to be setting around those bits. A bit more of the orangey colour down here, so it looks all very bright at the moment. We just let those blend in, because it's nice and wet there. We're then going to start putting in a little bit of the weak purpley colour. I'm going to just give myself a little bit of the clouds and things while this is weak purpley into those colours I've already got there. Just give the effect of night drawing in, a few little clouds coming across the sky here, and again matching that with this side. They're not quite so much on this side, the lower part as you have at the top. And then get this stronger purpley colour and start to put in some stronger clouds. Just tickle them around so they get these fluffy shapes. Now I'm not going to put that into the bottom, because I'm going to build that up in a slightly different way down the bottom in a minute when this is dry. Put a few little clouds over this side as well, and then a bit of darker one coming in. So I'm wiggling my brush as I put it on here, just so I don't get straight lines. So some people tend to paint in straight lines. You don't want to do that. You just want to just wiggle your brush around so you get these soft, fluffy edges to the clouds here, and then getting them stronger and stronger as I'm putting more and more paint in to build these up. Clouds get narrower towards the horizon and wider as they get above your head. So they get broader as they come up here. I'm saying I'm going to leave this side, the bottom part, with these colours, because I'm going to put some other colours over the top of that. Let's just put a little bit of darker colour in here. Make it quite strong and dark and bold. So I've got some different layers of clouds showing up. And then I think I shall leave it at that. If you want to, what you can do is get a little bit of clean tissue, and where you've got white bits, if you want to crisp up the top of a cloud, just put a little bit of tissue on and push it back from the white into the bit of the blue colour, just to crisp it up a bit. But I think that will probably do. So I'm just going to leave that to dry now. You can dry it with a hairdryer, but we're just going to leave it to dry for a few moments, and then I'll come back to it. Right, so that's nice and dry now. So if, now I've dried it with a hairdryer. If you wanted to and put more colour in, you could now re-wet it all over. It has to be bone dry, and then you can add a little bit more colour into it. But I think that's going to be enough for us to work on a bit more. I want to put some sunbeams coming down here, but I'm going to do the hills and that first, a little bit more around here, and then put them in a few moments. It's up to you when you do it, but I'll show you how to do those in a minute. So now we're going to do the distant cliffs, and we're going to use a little bit of a purpley colour to start with. Ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson just onto dry paper, and we swap to an 8 round brush now, just a nylon-y type of brush. Just fill it in as you go. Don't try and paint all the way along the edges and then come back. fill it in as you go, and just put a little distant headland in, like that. That's one done. And then move on to the next one. Make the colour a little bit darker. You can use ultramarine blue and burnt umber for this one, or my favourite mix of colours at the moment, which is a bit of indigo, which is very, very similar, but I then add a little bit of other colours into it to make it a little bit stronger and darker. But we'll just use, I don't know, a little bit of purple colour and a tiny touch of indigo into it to make it a little bit stronger and darker. And again, same thing with that, just load your brush, start somewhere at the top, bring it over and fill it in as you go down here. Just do one bit at a time, bring it across, slightly in front of the other one and along where the shoreline's going to go, and then move along to the next section, filling that in as you go to give you a couple of distant hillside. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit patchy, because it would just look like the folds and creases in the distant hills there. When I'm painting like this, I tend to put a blob of paint on and drag it around. Don't try and eke your paint out. Put a big blob of paint on and drag it around, and then when you've finished, dry your brush, put the tip of your brush in, and then take out any puddles. Again, if your board's tilted, you should end up with a little puddle at the bottom. That's the cliffs done. So that's an easy part to it. We're going to then put some distant sea in here. So again, a little bit of the purpley colour, ultramarine blue, a touch of Elysian crimson, make it a bit of the purpley colour. And we're going to put a series of horizontal lines in. I'm just tilting my board a bit so I can actually do them across like that. It's very difficult to do a line coming across unless you're going with the way of your wrist. So I'm just putting in some horizontal bands across here so you can let some of the original colour show through that you put on there from the sky originally. So that'll just pick up some of the original shading. So this bit of the purple, and I've actually got some of the other colour mixing in with it by chance because it's just happens to be there. You could use a flat brush for this to give you some nice edges to it, but we just want to give a suggestion of the waves and where the light bits are be catching the sunlight. This will probably go a bit darker over this side because it's the reflection of the hillside in the back there, so it'll be quite dark close to it. And then just bring those down, a bit more purpley colour, just to give you the look of the waves on there. And then before I finish that, I'll just get a little bit of the stronger dark, the same colour as used at the top there, just put a little bit of the darker colour in just by where the hills are. You can leave a little bit of white every now and again, it just breaks that up a bit, makes it look like little waves on the ocean there. So that's the hills and the distant sea put in, so fairly quick with that, and let those little bits dry. The beach is a little bit more awkward. You have to think a little bit more about what you're doing with these sandbanks on here. So we're going to wet one part of it at a time, and then just use a little bit of bluey grey colour, same sort of colours again. Just add a little bit of bluey grey colour, and then on the very front edge we're going to put a bit of dark. I'll show you what I mean with that. I'm going to use a slightly larger brush to wet with, because it will just cover a bigger area. So leave a gap between the sea, just a millimetre or two, go straight across here with a bit of water. This will make it blur and run a bit, so just straight across those, perhaps just wiggle that edge slightly so it's not straight. Then into that some weak purple or some weak bluey grey colour, just keeping it soft. Again, the sand will pick up the colours from the sky and bits behind there. So some weak greys into that, leaving that little gap so it looks like a little bit of wet sand coming up there. Bringing that down. And then on that front edge, I'm just going to get a stronger bit of bluey grey colour. And just take my smaller brush now and just run that every now and again, just along that bottom edge, so it runs up into the sandbank. So again, on that front edge here, a little bit of the stronger colour. While this is still wet, just run it up there. So wherever you've left that part, it will just run straight up into the little bit of the background there. You can put a little wiggle or two going across there to break it up as if there's a shadow coming across that edge. So it comes onto the dry paper on this front edge and then touches into the water that you've got there for the back edge, and it should look like the shadow at the front of a little bit of a rivulet or something like that coming across there. I'll put a few little streaks into that as well to make it. So I'm not trying to cover up the original colours, I'm just trying to let them show through as if they're wet, the sand's wet and it's catching the light in those bits. So I do all sorts of little patterns and shapes now in the same sort of way. I can carry on doing some of these, just putting a bit of water on, leaving a gap or two to leave these little streams running through here. Let's just do a little wiggly one coming around here. Just getting it a bit wider as I come forward. So that's just the water. So I'm just using my slightly bigger brush for doing that. And then I'll put in a bit of weak grey colour or even purpley grey colour into that. So a little bit more of the purpley colour. Whoop, a bit strong. Never mind, I'll keep going with that. And these little bits I'm leaving behind, which are still dry, they should look like the little bits of the streams and things running in between the patches of sand on here. And then just on the front edge of that, same again now, I'm just going to get the stronger dark and just anything that's got a little front edge to it, just run that along the dry bit of the paper so it bleeds back and then onto, touches into the water behind it. So it just makes it look like the sandbanks, or should do. Making sure this stays wet on those edges. And then we're just bringing some of these a little bit more diagonally forward. Let me just turn that round for you because I've just realised I'd tilted it, so keeping that nice and wet on that edge. So just going to bring a few more of those in, just a patch here, perhaps another little patch across there, and then bluey grey colour onto those. A little bit more of the weaker grey. And then some stronger bits. Oops, there's a wiggle there, never mind, we'll put that on in. Into some of the front edges of those. To give you the effects of that. We want a few rocks and pebbles in there, but that's pretty well the background, the sea, the little bits of the beach on there. So while that's drying out, I'll go back to what I was going to do earlier, and that's put some sunbeams in. A couple of different ways of doing that. Sometimes you can get a slightly damp brush and wet it and rub it down there, which helps to lift them out. Or you can just take a firm lead with a rubber, and if you just take an ordinary hard rubber and just rub it across your paint, it's just enough to start to give you little sunbeams. Make sure you come from the same spot if you're doing this. So make sure that your sun's here. You don't want too many of them. Just a few little bits too, because it's got to come out from where the sun is. So make sure it's coming from that direction. You can't have another one coming over there because you won't have two suns. It's just the one just poking out. There's some slightly different length ones. Some shorter ones, some longer ones, just to give you a few little sunbeams. And that should be enough for that. It's just subtly enough to give you a little hint of something there as we get those fingers come down from the sun rays. I'm going to have to let that dry again because I need to put some rocks and some people in there. So I'm just going to give it another blast with a hairdryer. Right, so I'm going to just put a few pebbles and boulders on here because it looks a bit flat and empty at the moment. So all I'm going to do is use, again, a smallish brush, 8 round. This has to be dry. So I've dried it with a hairdryer now. I'm just going to put in a few little roundy lumps, make them different sizes. You have some small ones, some big ones, just a few scattered around there. Into that I'm just going to drop a bit of the purpley colour again, or the purpley grey colour. So just get a few little tiny bits going in like that, and then take a stronger dark, so ultramarine blue and burnt umber mix or something nice and strong and dark, and flatten the bottom out. So put it into the paint here, and then have just a few dots here and there. So just flatten the bottoms of them out, and a few extra little lumps and dots to make it look like a little cluster of pebbles. That was a bit of a pig's ear. Let's just make that one a bit more shapely, because that was got into too much of a lump. So this one here, just flatten it out a dot or two. So this is just like little pebbles, boulders and pebbles on the beach. So they're flatter at the bottom because they're buried in the sand, and that's going to be darker because it's in shadow. So as you can see, you can alter the shape of these as you're going along, as I am doing, which I wasn't supposed to be doing, but that's the way. We can just do a few little clusters like that. So again, I'll put a few more of those in, another little cluster over here. Just put a little blob of water on. So by putting the water on first, it makes the colours run and blur into each other. So you can just keep perhaps a big boulder, a little boulder, a few smaller ones. It's very hard to keep these random sizes. A bit of the bluey grey in. You seem to get the idea of doing one shape, and then you automatically do every other shape the same way. You think, oh, that's a nice shaped boulder, I'll do another one like that, until all of them are identical. So if you can, try and just vary the shape of them a little bit. And you can put as many of these on as you want to. I'll perhaps put a few more little dots and things, just a few little, but keep them flat at the bottom, rounded at the top. And that should probably be enough. If they're in the water, I might put a reflection or two, but I don't think I really need it with those. I want to put a person or a couple of people on there. So just a nice strong dark for those. And the way I do people, and I'll show you some people in a minute on a different thing, I think, but on another piece of paper. But let's just do these on here. We just want a nice strong dark, and I'm trying to think of an elongated carrot shape or diamond shape. So think of it, elongated carrot or diamond shape. Don't try and get into all the details of arms and legs and things, but if you just stick sort of an arm down, go small with the head, because you can always make it bigger, but if you make it too big, it's very difficult to make it small again. So that's a little person. Perhaps have a hand in the pocket by making it come out sideways. And then directly underneath that, where there's water, you're going to put some horizontal dashes for the reflection. If it's a shadow, it comes out sideways, but if it's going into water, you'll have little horizontal dashes to make it look like it's reflected in there. Looks a bit lonely on his own there, so I'll put another one on there. So a sort of elongated carrot or almost diamond shape for the body there, going down into a leg. And this one I might just have a little bent leg there or something like that. Again, it looks a bit like his hands are in his pockets there, or her hands are in her pockets. Little head, don't go too big with the head, otherwise it looks like they've got a spaceman's helmet on. And again, just little dashes into the water to reflect it down. They're quite long, those little dashes, to give you the ripples and the reflection into the water there. I think that'll do for the people. I think the sky needs a little something, so all we'll do is a few little seagulls whirling around up here, and they're just little tick signs. They're just like long shapes, which will give you, just do them in different directions, a bit like doing the rocks. You get one right and you think, oh, I'll do another one exactly the same, but you need to get them going in slightly different directions, perhaps a little V shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, we want an odd number, so we'll have one whirling across here, something like that. And I think that'll do it. That's about it, really.